You have 10 minutes to get out of this house, Steve, or I'm calling the police. My wife of 17 years said those words without a single tear, standing over 2 packed suitcases like she'd been rehearsing this moment for months. 3 hours later, a sheriff's deputy knocked on my motel room door, and what he told me made my blood run cold. My perfect wife hadn't just planned a divorce, she'd orchestrated something far more sinister. What I discovered on her cloud backup that night will make you check your bank accounts right now. Viewers, have you ever looked at someone you loved and realized you never really knew them at all? How would you react if your entire marriage was a lie? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Before this story begins, subscribe. You'll never look at relationships the same way again. My name is Steve Wayne, and I'm a 42-year-old software engineer living in Portland, Oregon. For 17 years, I thought I had it all figured out. A beautiful home in the Pearl District worth every penny of that mortgage, 2 amazing kids, Emma at 14 and Jake at 11, and a wife who everyone said was my perfect match. I worked remotely for a tech company, pulling in about 6 figures a year, enough to keep us comfortable, maybe even a little spoiled. Mary ran a boutique marketing firm downtown, always coming home with stories about demanding clients and big wins. We were the couple other people envied at dinner parties, the ones who seemed to have cracked the code on marriage and success. Friends would ask us for advice and we'd laugh and say communication and trust were everything. I believed that. I believed every word of it. My brother Derek up in Seattle never quite bought into the fairy tale though. At our wedding back in 2009, he pulled me aside between the ceremony and reception, his hand firm on my shoulder, eyes serious in a way that made my stomach tighten. He said something I'd never forget: "She's got ambition, Steve. Real ambition. Just make sure it doesn't run over you someday." I laughed it off then, called him cynical, told him he was just jealous I'd found someone so driven and beautiful. But that warning lived somewhere in the back of my mind, a quiet echo I ignored for nearly 2 decades. Last Tuesday at exactly 6:47 in the evening, I walked through my front door expecting dinner, homework, and normalcy. Instead, I found 2 packed suitcases and a wife who looked at me like I was already a stranger. That's when everything I thought I knew shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces. I pushed through the front door with my laptop bag still slung over my shoulder, already thinking about what Jake might need help with for his math homework. The golden evening light poured through our floor-to-ceiling windows, the ones Mary had insisted we install during the renovation 3 years ago. She was standing in the middle of our living room, arms crossed over her chest, wearing that navy blazer she saved for important client meetings. 2 suitcases sat at her feet. My suitcases. My heart started hammering before my brain could catch up. "Mary, what's going on?" I asked, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. Her eyes met mine, and that's when I knew something fundamental had broken. They weren't sad or conflicted. They were empty, like she'd already mourned whatever we'd had and moved on months ago without telling me. "I need you to leave, Steve. Tonight. Right now," she said, her voice steady and practiced. My mouth went dry. "What are you talking about? Where are the kids?" I could hear the panic creeping into my words. "They're at my mother's. This doesn't concern them yet." She pulled out her phone with hands that didn't shake at all, didn't hesitate. "I've already talked to a lawyer. You need to go." The room tilted. I thought about the vacation we'd planned to Cannon Beach just last week, how she'd smiled at the restaurant menus online, how she'd laughed when Jake suggested we rent bikes. Had that all been performance? "Mary, we can talk about whatever's wrong," I said, stepping forward, reaching for something familiar. "Just tell me what happened. Whatever it is, we can. There's nothing to talk about. I want a divorce. I've already filed the paperwork. You'll be served tomorrow." Then she stepped closer, and her voice dropped to something that made my blood turn cold. "You can't just throw me out of my own house," I said, but even I could hear how weak it sounded. "Actually, I can. And if you don't leave in the next 10 minutes, I'm calling the police and telling them I feel threatened." Her face showed something then, just for a second. Was it satisfaction? I grabbed my suitcase, hands shaking, and walked out of the life I'd built. I ended up at a Motel 6 off Highway 26, the kind of place where the neon sign flickered and you didn't look too closely at the carpet. The room smelled like stale cigarettes and industrial cleaner, and the bedspread had burns I didn't want to think about. I sat on the edge of the mattress for what felt like hours, just staring at the peeling wallpaper, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My phone buzzed around 9:30. A text from Mary, cold and clinical. "Don't try to contact the kids. They need space to adjust." Adjust to what? She wouldn't even tell me what I'd supposedly done wrong. I called Derek in Seattle, my hands still trembling. He answered on the 3rd ring, voice thick with sleep. "Steve? It's late, man. What's up?" Mary kicked me out. Filed for divorce. Won't tell me why. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then he exhaled hard. Jesus. Where are you? Some motel. I looked around the dingy room at the life I'd somehow fallen into in less than 3 hours. Derek, I don't understand. Everything was fine. We just planned that vacation. She was smiling and laughing. Steve, people don't just wake up and decide to divorce. Something's been building. You need a lawyer. Like tomorrow morning, first thing. He paused and I could hear him moving around, probably getting out of bed. Listen, I never said this before because you seemed happy, but Mary always had this edge. This calculating thing. Remember when she convinced you to put Dad's inheritance in the joint account 5 years ago? I did remember. $340,000 from my father's estate, money he'd saved his whole life. Mary had said it would be simpler for taxes, for the kids' future, for investments. I trusted her completely. I trusted her with everything. As I hung up with Derek, something nagged at me, a memory of her asking me to set up cloud backups for her work files 6 months ago. She'd been terrified of losing client data. I'd set it to sync to our family account. I opened my laptop in that dim motel room, hands shaking, and logged in. The laptop screen glowed blue in the darkness, rain starting to tap against the motel window like impatient fingers. I couldn't sleep, couldn't think straight, but I kept coming back to those cloud backups. Mary had probably forgotten I had access to everything. Her files loaded slowly, the little spinning wheel mocking me. Marketing proposals, client contracts, meeting notes, all organized and professional just like her. Then I saw the folder labeled Personal Private. My cursor hovered over it. This was crossing a line, invading her privacy, but she'd crossed one first by destroying our marriage without explanation. I clicked. Inside were dozens of documents, legal forms, financial spreadsheets, and emails. So many emails. The first one I opened was from her lawyer, dated 2 months ago. Subject line, Asset Protection Strategy. My hands went numb as I read the message. Mary, as we discussed, filing first gives you significant strategic advantage. Ensure all joint accounts are documented. The temporary restraining order will prevent him from accessing funds or returning to the property. I recommend you establish separate accounts immediately and transfer what you're entitled to. She'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. Every smile, every kiss goodnight, every family dinner had been a performance while she systematically prepared to destroy me. But it got worse. Another folder caught my eye, Tier, Confidential. I clicked it open and my stomach dropped. Photos filled the screen. Mary with a man I'd never seen before, someone who looked my age but everything about him screamed wealth. Designer suits, expensive watch, that effortless confidence of old money. They were at restaurants I'd never been to, holding hands across candlelit tables. At a beach house I didn't recognize, her head on his shoulder. In some photos they were kissing. In others worse. Text messages were saved as screenshots, a digital diary of betrayal. Him, can't wait until you're finally free. Steve never deserved you. Mary, soon babe. My lawyer says another month tops. Then we can go public. Him, and the money? Mary, handled. He has no idea I've been moving funds. By the time he figures it out, it'll be too late. I felt like someone had reached into my chest and crushed my heart with their bare hands. With shaking hands, I logged into our joint bank account, the one that was supposed to hold my father's inheritance, the money for Emma's and Jake's college funds. The balance showed $3,247. Over $200,000 was gone. I scrolled through months of transactions, my vision blurring with rage and disbelief. Transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, cash withdrawals, payments to law firms, to something called TC Holdings LLC, to places I'd never heard of. She'd been robbing me blind while I sat 30 feet away in my home office, working to support our family, believing in us. I ran to the bathroom and threw up, my whole body shaking. That's when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Mr. Wayne? This is Deputy Sheriff Morrison. I need to speak with you immediately about a serious matter. 20 minutes later, red and blue lights flashed through my motel window, painting the walls in alternating colors of emergency. 2 deputies stood at my door when I opened it, rain dripping from their hats, expressions grim. Steve Wayne. Yes. My voice came out hoarse. I'm Deputy Morrison, this is Deputy Chin. We need to talk to you about a domestic violence allegation filed this evening by your wife, Mary Wayne. Every muscle in my body locked up. What? I would never. Sir, we're not here to arrest you, Morrison said, holding up a hand. But your wife filed for a restraining order claiming you became violent when she asked for a divorce. She has photographs of bruises on her arm. That's impossible. I left peacefully. I didn't touch her. I've never laid a hand on her in 17 years. Deputy Morrison's expression softened slightly, something in my desperation seeming to register with him. Sir, can we come in? I stepped aside, letting them into the cramped motel room. My laptop was still open on the bed, Mary's emails displayed on the screen like evidence at a crime scene. Deputy Chin noticed it immediately, his eyes narrowing. What's that? Evidence that my wife has been planning to frame me, I said, hearing the desperation in my own voice. Look, please, just look at what she's been doing. I showed them everything, my hands trembling as I clicked through files. The emails detailing her strategy, the photos with her lover, the financial documents showing the systematic theft of our money. Deputy Morrison studied the screen carefully, his jaw tightening with each new revelation. He'd seen something like this before, I could tell by the way his eyes moved, recognizing patterns. 3 months earlier he'd responded to a domestic call just 2 blocks from our house. A woman had made similar allegations against her husband, claiming violence and fear. The man had lost custody of his kids, his house, his entire savings in the divorce. 6 months later, it came out she'd fabricated everything with her boyfriend's help to gain full control of the assets. Morrison had testified at the hearing that eventually cleared the man's name, but the damage was already done. The guy had lost a year of his life and his relationship with his children. Morrison wouldn't let that happen again if he could help it. Mr. Wayne, I need you to send all of this to yourself and to me right now, Morrison said firmly. Do not delete anything. Forward every single email, every document, every photo. What? What's happening? Because your wife just made a serious accusation that could destroy your life, he said, meeting my eyes. But if what you're showing me is legitimate, she's committed fraud, possibly perjury and false reporting. We need to document everything before it disappears. Deputy Chin leaned forward, studying the photos Mary had supposedly submitted. The bruises she showed us, they were on her left arm, correct? I didn't see any bruises, I said. I swear to God I didn't touch her. Chin exchanged a meaningful look with Morrison. She showed us photos tonight. But something felt off when we took the report. The metadata on those photos shows they were taken 4 days ago, not tonight. Before you allegedly got violent. My mind reeled, trying to process what that meant. She planned this. She bruised herself days ago and just waited for the right moment to use it against me. Morrison nodded slowly, his expression darkening. That's exactly what it looks like, Mr. Wayne. By 6 in the morning, I'd consumed 4 cups of terrible motel coffee and uncovered something that made the affair look like a minor detail. TC Holdings LLC was registered in Delaware, a common state for shell companies trying to hide ownership, but the registered agent listed an address in Portland. The same exact address as Mary's marketing firm. That couldn't be coincidence. I dug deeper, following digital breadcrumbs through business filings and public records. Mary's boutique marketing firm wasn't what I'd thought. Over the past 2 years, it had taken on increasingly large clients with suspiciously vague project descriptions. Consulting fees of $50,000, $80,000, even $120,000 from companies I'd never heard of her mentioning. When I cross-referenced those company names through business registries, they all led back to the same person. Thomas Reeves, the man in the photos with Mary. The man she'd been planning her future with while sleeping next to me. Thomas Reeves wasn't just some rich boyfriend. He was a real estate developer with a reputation for aggressive business tactics and persistent rumors of fraud that somehow never quite stuck in court. 3 years ago, his name appeared in a local news article about a housing development that displaced dozens of low-income families. He'd called the reporter who wrote it and threatened a defamation lawsuit. The story disappeared from the paper's website within a week. Then I found something that made my blood run cold. An article from 2 years ago, buried in the business section. Reeves Development Partners announces major Pearl District acquisition. Our neighborhood. I pulled up property records, my coffee going cold beside me as I traced the pattern. Over the past 6 months, an LLC hidden behind layers of corporate shells had been systematically buying up properties around our house. The endgame was obvious to anyone in real estate. Acquire enough adjacent lots, demolish everything, and build luxury condos that would sell for millions. But our house sat right in the middle of the planned development. It was the holdout property they desperately needed. And I would never sell. Mary knew that. I loved that house with everything in me. We'd renovated it together, or so I'd thought. I hired Rachel Kim that morning, a young attorney with a reputation for being aggressive and thorough. When I showed her everything I'd found, her eyes lit up with the fire of someone who just discovered a case that could define her career. This is bigger than divorce, Steve. We're talking fraud, forgery, possibly RICO charges if we can prove Reeves orchestrated this from the beginning. The emergency hearing was scheduled for 11 o'clock in Judge Patterson's courtroom. I showed up wearing yesterday's clothes, unshaven, looking exactly like what I was, a man who'd spent the night in a motel room having his life destroyed. Mary sat across the aisle with her attorney Marcus Webb, a high-priced divorce lawyer known for annihilating husbands in court. She looked perfect in a navy suit, hair styled immaculately, dabbing her eyes with tissue at just the right moments. The wronged wife, vulnerable and afraid. I looked like the villain. Judge Patterson reviewed the restraining order petition, her reading glasses perched on her nose. Mrs. Wayne, you're alleging your husband became violent when you asked for a divorce? Yes, Your Honor, Mary said, her voice cracking with practiced emotion. I was terrified. He grabbed my arm and threatened me. I had no choice but to call the police. Webb stood, his expensive suit catching the courtroom lights. Your Honor, Mrs. Wayne has photographic evidence of bruising consistent with her testimony. We ask that the restraining order be granted immediately for her safety. Rachel stood beside me, her voice clear and steady. Your Honor, if I may, those photographs are time-stamped 4 days before the alleged incident. The metadata doesn't lie. Judge Patterson's eyebrow raised sharply. Is that true, Mr. Webb? Webb faltered, shuffling papers. The timestamp could be incorrect, Your Honor. Phone cameras sometimes, or, Rachel continued, her voice cutting through his excuse, Mrs. Wayne fabricated evidence as part of a larger scheme to defraud my client of his assets, his home and his children. We have extensive documentation. Mary's perfect mask slipped for just 1 second. I saw panic flash across her face before she controlled it. But the judge saw it too. Rachel presented everything methodically, each piece of evidence building on the last like a prosecutor dismantling an alibi. The emails showing premeditation, the financial transfers I'd never authorized, the forged quitclaim deed transferring our house into Mary's name alone, then immediately selling it to TC Holdings for $400,000 over market value. The connection to Thomas Reeves became undeniable as document after document hit the judge's desk. Judge Patterson had presided over a case involving Reeves 3 years ago, a family suing after being pressured to sell their home below market value for one of his developments. She'd ruled in favor of the family, and Reeves had filed a complaint against her that went nowhere. But she remembered him. I could see it in the way her expression hardened. Mrs. Wayne, did you transfer $237,000 from joint accounts without your husband's knowledge or consent? Patterson asked, her voice like ice. Mary's attorney jumped in quickly. Your Honor, those were marital assets she was entitled to manage. Did you forge your husband's signature on a quitclaim deed? The courtroom went silent. Mary's face had gone pale, her hands gripping the table. Did you sell marital property to an LLC owned by Thomas Reeves, a man with whom you have a documented romantic relationship? No one answered. The silence stretched until it became damning. Judge Patterson set down the papers with deliberate care. The restraining order is denied. Emergency custody is denied. Mrs. Wayne, you are ordered to return all transferred funds within 48 hours, and I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for possible criminal charges including fraud, forgery, and filing a false police report. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel came down like a gunshot. As I walked out of the courtroom, my legs shaking with adrenaline and relief, I saw him. Thomas Reeves stood in the hallway wearing a perfectly tailored suit, his arms crossed, watching me with cold calculation. As our eyes met, he smiled slowly and mouthed 2 words that made my blood freeze. This isn't over. Then he turned and walked away, his expensive shoes clicking against the marble floor, disappearing into the crowd like a ghost who'd already planned his next haunting. 6 months later, I'm sitting in the house I almost lost, watching Emma and Jake do homework at the kitchen table we'd bought together 7 years ago. The afternoon light streams through those floor-to-ceiling windows, but everything feels different now, cleaner somehow, like the air itself has been purified. Mary pleaded guilty to fraud and forgery. She got 3 years with a suspended sentence, probation, and was ordered to repay everything plus damages. Her marketing firm collapsed within weeks, clients fleeing once the news broke. Her reputation was destroyed in the same professional circles where she'd once been celebrated. Thomas Reeves is currently facing trial for a scheme that defrauded 11 families out of over $4 million. The district attorney told me he'll likely get 8 to 12 years in federal prison. Turns out I wasn't his first victim, just the biggest score. He had a pattern of finding women married to men with assets, seducing them, helping them systematically drain their husbands before development deals. I got full custody. Emma and Jake went through therapy, and we're still working through layers of trauma that'll probably take years to fully unpack. Emma asked me once, tears streaming down her face, "Did Mom ever actually love us, or were we just part of her plan?" I told her the truth because she deserved that much. "I don't know, sweetheart. But I love you both more than anything in this world, and that's enough to build on." The house is different now. I repainted every room, replaced furniture that carried memories I didn't want anymore, made it ours instead of hers. My brother Derek visits from Seattle every month, never saying, "I told you so," but I see it in his eyes sometimes, that sad vindication. I started dating again, carefully, with walls I never had before. Trust doesn't come easy anymore, maybe it never will. But here's what I learned sitting in that motel room, my entire life crumbling around me. Betrayal reveals truth, and truth, no matter how devastating, is infinitely better than living inside a beautiful lie. Sometimes the sheriff showing up at your door isn't the end. Sometimes it's the beginning. If this shocked you, subscribe, like, comment and share, because the next story is worse.